Yeah, so hi. Nice to see you all. Thanks so much for coming. I'm Allison House. I'm doing a lot of work in education these days, but I am actually here to talk about my visual art. So I'm going to be talking to you about my transition, my journey in the last few years, going from working in product design and designing apps to working pretty much exclusively now with 3D illustration and animation. Just for a little bit of background, I was the lead designer at two tech education startups, Codecademy and Treehouse, and then most recently I was at Dropbox. This is like maybe 3 years ago, I think I left, which sounds like a really long time to me, so it's good to take stock, I think, once in a while and see what you've done. So the reason that I joined Dropbox was because I had been the lead designer at these two companies, and they were small startups, and I really kind of had hit my ceiling in terms of growth. When you're in that situation, you often can't just grab another designer and get feedback. So I really wanted to be on a team where pretty much everybody else was better at design than I was, so that I could, rapidly grow. And so I ended up joining Dropbox. My buddy Morgan there was the one who sort of hooked me and pulled me in. And I learned more there than I have anywhere else. It's still something I still think about, like the philosophy and the way they iterate and like the things like that every single day in my work, even if I'm not explicitly doing product. But another thing happened when I was there, and that was that I found myself getting less passionate about product design. And I think in our space, sometimes we hold passion as this sort of like job requirement. Like we have to be passionate to enjoy our work and to do our work well. And to feel less passionate about it almost felt like a failing of my own. So, I ended up, seems like really blasphemous for some reason. So I ended up leaving Dropbox, but it was sort of like a process of realization for me where, so I ended up getting put on the growth team, and I would kind of sit in meetings, and I'd be zoning out a little bit, and I'd hear these words flying by, user retention strategy and growth hacking, and I'd kind of find myself fantasizing about strangling that person, just a little bit. I don't want to really hurt him, but you gotta shake him up a little bit. So it started to come clear that maybe product wasn't for me anymore, but that was tough for me because I started doing design for the web when I was 11. That was the first website I made. It was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer website when I was 11 years old. And darn it, I fell so in love with it that I kept making websites for years, kind of trying to chase down that spark, that thrill, that first line of HTML, or that that CSS declaration that you couldn't make work, but then you made it work. I love conquering those types of problems. But product design had become very much a job to me. And so I wasn't as excited about it as I used to be. And so when I got to this point where I left Dropbox, I had to figure out, okay, well, I'm free of the bondage of product design, but I didn't know what my passion was now, right? It's kind of okay, cool, you're free to do whatever you want, but I didn't really know what I want to do. And I feel like this is something you can go through at any phase in your life. Sometimes you just get less interested in things, and you have to get curious and find something new to pursue. So fortunately, I am a pretty curious gal. And one of the things that I came across during this sort of transitioning period was 3D. 3D is the best thing ever. 3D is amazing. So let me show you, actually I'll do a little play-by-play of the very first thing I ever made in 3D. So this was a tutorial that I was doing from a site called Grayscale Gorilla. Really exceptional resource if you're interested in learning about 3D. They specifically use Cinema 4D. So here I am just sort of in the very first part. I've made some kind of bomb and I've made it move, but my caption is, okay, best animation ever or what, because I'm already pretty excited about it. And then I got a little wick attached to it, and then the wick went in the bomb. It went in the bomb, and I was really rewatching these. I got really excited. I was like, oh, it did go in the bomb. So this is the best day of my life. Then I started to lose it because the caption here is just ah ha 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 ha. But come on, it exploded. Wait. Come on, that's pretty. It's a thing. That was nothing, and then I made a something. Okay, and so here is the final piece here, where I'm just like over the edge at this point. I just look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. But yeah, this was the first time I ever did anything in 3D, and I learned so much with just this one friggin' tutorial. I learned about modeling, about materials. We got a little texture on that bomb. Lighting, you see those boxes are so nicely lit with a slight purple cast. Simulation, because that wasn't hand animated, like these are just like getting hit by dynamics and then flying. And then also animation, like this, I had to say, okay, this wick starts here and then it kind of goes in. So there was so much there for me to explore and learn, and I felt that same spark, that I had kind of like wanted to feel again about my work. And so 3D became like the thing. So before I get into before I go any further, I'm going to show you just a little bit of my work. So this is going to be, rather than this being like a reel of my best work, this is actually going to be from the very beginning, where I started about 3 years ago, progressing to more recent work. Here's the thing about 3D. If you've never done it before, it's kind of a black box to you. People don't know exactly what's involved. They don't know how big the barriers are, so they don't get started. So what I want to do today is show you a couple of projects and actually do a little bit of 3D with you, starting from scratch, no fancy plugins, no fancy render settings, just to show you some kind of like easy techniques that you can use if you're interested in getting started. So when I first kind of like found 3D, for me, like the biggest thing in terms of ramping up was I wanted to produce a ridiculous amount of work. I think across everything I've done, like in education, like in the classroom, or like hiring a Dropbox, what is really consistent is that people who are going to be or are top performers produce more work than anybody else. And so I kind of wanted to take that learning and apply it to myself. I love to teach, but in this case, I'm kind of like learning, so I want to self-teach. And I started to kind of develop this notion of having a second shift. So I was freelancing at this time, but I was still doing app work because I wasn't really sure, like what to do next. And so after work every single day, I started doing sort of a second shift where I was exploring things and trying new things. And I kind of developed this idea of what the perfect practice session looks like for me. So I'm not very good at scheduling myself to do things. I don't know that most of us are. So if I say at 6 p.m. every night I'm going to practice for 2 hours, I won't. And I think we've all been there where we've tried to like force ourselves to do something or make ourselves do something and then just kind of failed because we don't necessarily have to be accountable to ourselves all of the time. So by chain, what I'm referring to is tacking your practice session onto something else that you already do in your routine every day. So for me, that was work. It started out as just like, okay, I'm going to work every day. Sometimes my last meeting is at 3 o'clock. Sometimes I'm working late and I end at 7. But without any pause or break or gap, as soon as I was done, I would flip a switch and start doing my practice time. When I was working in New York City for a little while, I did a contract there, and I was commuting every day for about, I was in transit for, I think, 5 hours or so. So I didn't have a lot of extra time to keep practicing. But I had, just started to get a foothold in 3D. So every time I got on the train, I sat down, I opened my laptop, and I started second shift. You just got to find something that you're already doing and then kind of like hook your practice session onto it and make it automatic. So the second thing is making it just ultra achievable, like to the point that it's sort of like laughably achievable. And the primary way that I did this was through GIFs. For animation, it's hard to beat GIFs because they're sort of like this concise piece. So I just did a lot of 2-second looping GIFs to explore different, techniques and styles and, kind of try and find my way. And the last thing, and we'll get to more pictures in just a second. The last thing is it has to have some kind of payoff. It's easy to follow a tutorial or to imitate something that you saw on whatever Behance Dribble and so on. But it's another thing to feel like what you're creating is meaningful. And I think when we're, again, kind of trying to force ourselves to learn something new, it's easy for us to lose motivation if we're just kind of going through the motions. So it's important to me that if I'm creating something, even if it's small, to connect it to a subject that I like, a topic, someone I love, something that reminds me of another time. So I'll show you a few examples. So these are all second shift pieces. This is one of the early ones that went viral, and I learned about watermarking on Tumblr. So this one's called volumetric drive-by. Super simple. You got 3 windows here cut out of a wall, and then you have some sort of like juiced up lights that are going by it. So it's a very manageable exercise, but it also meant something to me. I was kind of thinking about when I was a kid, and I'd be in my bedroom, and all the lights were off, and I'm supposed to be asleep, but I wasn't asleep just yet. And cars would go on by, and you'll see like the wash of light that kind of like comes into your room and then it fades away. There's something just like nice and nostalgic about that. And I like that with just a few pieces here, I can kind of capture that mood for me. Here's another one. So this one is kind of like going back to my design roots. This is the HF1 television from Braun. Of course, it has been slightly rebranded in this case. But all I was doing here was actually just practicing modeling. And these are really just a bunch of cubes layered one on top of another to form a television. But just by adding sort of the camera angles, it became something that looks like, sort of a more polished piece. And here's another one, and I always like to use this one because this was actually inspired by a friend of mine, Ryan Putnam. So he posted this shot on Dribbble, and I just love this little cactus. How cute is that? And it was a Friday, and I was just about to finish work. So I thought I'd do a little, ode to Ryan and do a little cactus here. And this is the last one, and I'm actually going to show you how to do this one and show you how easy it is. I think it's, I've talked about this notion of second shift before and how like you got to make things achievable. And I think sometimes, I've had folks say to me like, well, it's probably achievable for you. So I want to show you what's actually involved in something like this and how easy it is to set up. And we can actually do it right now in Cinema from scratch. All right, so I'm opening up Cinema 4D here. So this is the 3D software package that I use. There are others out there, of course, but I really like this one because I love the community. I think they have a lot of really good resources. The people creating those resources are exceptional educators and just like really nice people. So I have found it to have sort of the best support and reinforcement in terms of my own learning. So that is sort of why I chose Cinema 4D. So we're going to start out by just grabbing a plane here. Oh, it'd help if I could see my whole menu. Oh, let's see. Maybe we can just tear this off. Oh, there we go. Can't imagine working on this size resolution. Okay, so we are going to grab, actually, let me put this back up. All right, so we're going to grab a primitive here. So these are primitives. These are just like the most basic possible shapes that you can stick into your scene, okay? And I'm going to grab a plane here, and this plane is going to be our water, okay? So I'm just going to flip back so you can see we're trying to recreate this right here. So here's our water. Okay, jumping into the plane here, we've got some parameters that we can change, so we can easily change the width and the height. Y'all have seen this stuff before in apps like Photoshop or in Illustrator, right? So you know how to do this. And I am going to change this width here to, got my notes, to 1,000 and 6,000. And just so you can see it, I'm also going to turn on the lines here. So now you can see all these vertices that are kind of hanging out. So width segments, we're going to go 30, and height, we're going to go 200. And that just gives us more polygons here to play with. So we're off to a good start, but if we render this, so I'm just going to render it real quick, not a whole lot going on. It's just a plane stretching for miles. So what we want to do is get a little bit of motion on that ocean. So incidentally, there is something called a displacer where we can displace the vertices that we have here. So I'm going to grab this displacer. I'm going to put it under the plane. You got to kind of like nest them. And we're going to get into, let's see, all my menus are tiny. Okay, and so we're going to use a custom shader here. And we're going to create everything's small. Hold on. Oh, there it is. Okay, noise shader. Okay, so we're going to use a noise shader. So right away, as soon as I put that noise shader on there, which is just, it's generating randomness for this displacer, you can already see there's a lot of lumps and bumps that are starting to show up. Okay, now they are kind of smooth, and I don't think smooth stuff looks that groovy, so I tend to remove all smoothness and just go for like straight raw edges and polygons. I spoke at NAB recently for Maxon, who are the creators of Cinema 4D. A lot of people cringed when I said that. I also like to turn off any anti-aliasing. I love a raw edge, so, but I know y'all know what I'm talking about. Okay, so so what was making that smooth is this Fong tag right here. It just kind of makes things look, well, it makes it so that you can't see where all the seams are. So if I render this now, okay, now we've got some more interesting geometry going on. So it's coming along. So what else do we need? Well, we need things to move. That would help. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here just so we have a bird's eye view. I'm going to go back into that displacer, and I'm going to customize this noise shader. All right, so here we go. And I'm headed down to animation speed. And my saving grace, the loop period. Okay, so I'm going to turn those both on to 1. And I'm going to hit play down here, so we have this kind of built-in timeline. Ah, okay, so now we see what's going on here. And the great thing is that loop period, when we set it to 1, it means every 1 second, every 30 frames, it's going to loop. That's perfect. We can make GIFs all day long. Y'all got time for that? All right, so we've got our movement, so that's a good start. I'm just going to make a couple more adjustments to make these, to make it just have a little more height. So down here under contrast, I'm going to pull this up to 30%. Okay, so actually let me zoom in so you can see what happened there. So 0, 30. Okay, so just a little bit more. So that way when the light hits this, we're going to get a little more action. And I'm turning this up to 10. Okay, so we're just going to a little more overall height. All right, so I'm going to pause this. I was about to say, and I'm going to save, because that's what I would normally do, but I guess we don't need to do that here. It's that impulse. I'm like, and then Command S. Okay, so we've got our water. That's good. All right, that's a good start. So we have a moon that we're missing, right? So we can actually just bring in a sphere for that. So that's another one of these kind of default primitives. All right. And now we can start getting into materials. So bottom left here, I'm going to make a couple materials. One is for this moon. So this is going to be a fully luminant object. And all that means is that when we render it, there's going to be no shadows, no lighting. It's not affected by other lights because it basically is like its own extremely bright, solid light. Okay. So there's luminance. Pop that on there. Pop that puppy on. Okay, and here's one more thing. So I want to get this ocean like extremely reflective, so that when the light hits it, we're going to get like kind of nice specular on the water here. So I'm going to reflectance. Actually, I'm just going to turn this to black for now. Going to reflectance. I'm going to add one of these legacy ones and turn this strength like all the way up, maybe to 90 or so. And I think that'll do it. Okay. So far, we're not going to see much of a change, except maybe that the ocean is going to disappear. But once we add lights, we can see how that interacts with the light. Okay. So here is a spotlight. Good. And let's see, if we're over here, we want it to face our way. So I'm just going to move over here. Going to rotate it in our direction. Maybe pull this up a little. Rotate it down. Okay. And so from this angle, we don't see anything happening. But once we get around here and we render it, here it comes, right? Now we got something going on. So this is cool. We've got, this looks like better than mine. Uh-oh. I think I prefer this one. Okay, so now we've got this, we got a dramatic moon in the sky. We've got our, our waves are lit. And when we export this as an animation, the ocean moves, right? All right, so that's kind of the rundown on how something like this is made. If you wanted to export this out, you would maybe put a camera in here. So by default, here's the camera. You can kind of see where it lands on the scene. So I'm just going to get into the camera here, and then you can set it, you can tweak the coordinates so that it's like perfectly dead on if you want, but we're pretty close, so I'm just going to leave that. And we can get into our settings here. So this is the render, the renderer. And if we get into our render settings here and go to our output, we can say we want to export all of these frames. Okay? And if we hit render, it's going to start exporting that entire animation for us. So I tend to actually take these, I'll save them out as movie files, and then bring them into Photoshop. Import them with video frames to layers. You can use After Effects, you can use Adobe Premiere. There are, of course, other ways to edit your video. I've been using Photoshop for so long that that's where I'm best with color. And a lot of this stuff that I'm producing is color driven. And it also means just I'm able to create things faster, right? So in this case, when I'm trying to make these GIFs and I just kind of want to do the exercise and get it done, I don't want to be futzing around with another program. So just as an FYI, if you're proficient in Photoshop, then you have a lot of options in terms of colorizing stuff like this, okay? All right, so that's the rundown. That's how Moonlight was made. What do you think? Was that hard? Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing all of your moons later, your moons and your lakes and your seas and your oceans. Okay, so I wanted to mention this project. I've kind of gone in depth about it in other talks, but I don't want to run over time today, so I just kind of wanted to bring it up. So after about 3 weeks of producing these GIFs, I actually had produced so many that I basically had a portfolio's worth of work. And one of my acquaintances, Spencer Tweedy, who we just kind of follow each other on social media, he was interested in design for a while, maybe still is, and so I kind of was following along with him. His dad is Jeff Tweedy being the frontman of Wilco. And his kid, Spencer and Jeff, were forming this kind of solo but not solo act called Tweedy. And so when Spencer saw all the work that I was putting out, there's a lot of pudding coming out of that oven. He reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to do our new music video? So of course, a great honor. I'm also a really big Wilco fan, but, oopsies, go back. But I had virtually no experience at this point. I just been kind of the longest animation I'd done was about 2 seconds. So it was an effort to bring together, enough for 3 minutes plus of footage and to create these scenes and so on. So I have a full rundown of this project if you're interested on my website. It's allison.house, which I hope you're able to remember. So if you're curious to see, how I went from sort of nothing to, producing all these scenes really quickly and what plugins I used, feel free to check that out. Okay, so I'm going to jump way forward now to a more recent project that I did, and I feel like this kind of brings it full circle. So recently I was working with Dropbox, and they wanted a set of posters for AAPI month, which is actually this month, the month of May, so Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, which is a mouthful, but we must be inclusive. And so this is the set of posters that I designed for them, and we also did t-shirts and a set of stickers, and it was great. But a lot of folks, when I posted this on Instagram, a lot of people were like, oh, did you use Illustrator for this? I thought you were doing 3D. And so I kind of want to, proof. This is 3D, so all this stuff is done in 3D here. So we got this one here. This one's representing China. There we go. Okay, and lastly, we have Japan. So all this stuff was just created in 3D, and I'm actually going to show you how I did this. So when I was kind of like testing things out, I had this notion that this would work. The basic idea is I used something called a depth pass and then brought it into Photoshop and applied a gradient map. So I'll show you what a depth pass is. So this is like, you know, the most sort of plain Jane scene setup, right? I've got kind of like a tunnel-like view through a bunch of cubes and spheres. So let's see if we can make this look cool. So this is a depth pass. So depth passes are used, for example, like let's say I were working on a movie and I had some sort of special effects in the movie. I could render out a depth pass in Cinema to determine where, like, so for example, if the blackest part should be the most out of focus and the whitest part should be the clearest and sharpest, I get this black to white map that I can then bring into After Effects or some other program, right, and then sort of like tweak some additional layers. Okay, so this would maybe be the typical use of something like a depth pass. But for us, like for visual people, I have found an entirely new use for it. So this is sort of the initial depth pass, and then I inverted it and brought it into Photoshop, and then I laid a gradient map on top of it. It's a really simple process, but the result is stunning. You get this like bizarre atmosphere that's sort of welling up from the ground and fading off into the distance. And so with only more objects in it, it just looked more and more interesting. So that was kind of the initial test. And these are this is Tyan and Mandeep, the pair I worked with goofing on the posters. But let me jump into Cinema here and show you exactly how this is done. So I'm actually gonna, let's see, let's just do like a landscape here. Let me grab, primitives. Okay, let's grab a landscape. So by default, landscape looks something like this. Let's play with some of these options here. So rough furrows, maybe we'll turn these up. I'm just trying to get something where we can get like some things far away and some things close so that we can get that depth. So fine furrows, maybe we'll crank those up, get something interesting happening there. Scale, good, yep. And then maybe we even put some sea, like kind of a sea-like bottom into it here. And so now, I mean, I'm ready to just drop like a FPS in here, just run around, shoot at the mountains. Now, you know, we can get in here and like we've got some depth going and like maybe get a view of what's close and what's far. We've got a little clipping going here, so here we go, something like this, perhaps. All right. Okay. So we've got kind of a camera angle here. I'm just going to drop a camera in here so that we don't lose it. So I'm going to zoom back out. The camera is not proportional to the actual mount. It's like a Godzilla camera. All right, so so before we get into the camera, actually, I'm going to go back into the render settings. And under multipass, we have depth. It's all the way at the bottom. You might have to scroll. And I'm going to turn that on. Okay, so now when I render this, so by default, like I render it and it looks like that. But if I take this into the actual picture viewer, so initially, if you do this at home, you'll see this first. I just had changed it because I left Cinema open. You can go to single pass here, switch to depth, and when you go back to your single pass depth, there we go. And when you go to the picture viewer now, you will see a depth pass. Now this doesn't look like a whole lot just now because we haven't yet told the camera what's far and what's close. We gotta kind of tell the camera what's important so that it can focus on that thing and then kind of fade other stuff into the background. So right now it's just sort of like the front and then everything else, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So in the camera, I love this, it's so simple. It's so simple. All right, in the camera first, we're gonna go to object here and go to focus distance. And I'm actually going to zoom in a little because I think we can kind of see a visual representation of this too. So, okay, so, no. This here, let's say we turned it down to like 500. There we go. So we can actually grab this handle and do it too. So let's say the furthest thing that I want to cover is maybe like the very back of this mountain, and then everything's going to taper off from there. So that's going to be my focus distance. What do we got? Details here. I'm going to turn on DOF map front blur, depth of field map. And we're going to crank this up. Let's see. think it's actually hidden. All right, I'm gonna hide the landscape just for a second so we can see this a little more clearly. Okay, so if we turn this up and down, ooh, I'm not seeing anything. Okay, let's do a test render. Okay, so now we have everything in the back, but we don't have the front part. All right, let's see what I'm missing. It will get figured out. This is always the best part. Okay. Am I just put it in the wrong place? There we go. I got it. Everyone remain calm. The issue is resolved. There it is. Okay, so see that moving right there? Okay, so I just had my numbers dialed up a little bit too high. Whew. Okay, so, because we got just an itty-bitty mountain here, but no one needs to know that because we're going to change the way depth is perceived. All right, so we want this front piece here that we got moving around. We want that, wherever that lands, whatever it's touching, that's going to be your whitest object, right? Like Seinfeld white. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and render this out. Ah, okay. Now we got something happening here. So now we get something groovy in the back, something groovy in the front. All right, so I'm going to turn this maybe down. Actually, let's get out of here. So we got to tweak this a little bit. I think this needs to come closer to the camera. And I think this other piece here, maybe we bring that in a little bit so that we get, the fall off happens a little bit sooner. Right now it's kind of pretty far out. Okay. So we're going to bring this in maybe around here. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Let's go ahead and jump in camera and let's see. Okay, so now we've got somewhere in between is probably best. So I'm just going to pull that number up one more time, and then I think we're going to take it to Photoshop. Let's do around here. Let's see. All right, okay, so now we got like a little bit of fading in the distance here. So from here, I can save this out. And if this isn't perfect, it's okay. Like you can mess with the levels in Photoshop later, and that's pretty doable even if it's a video in other programs. So we're going to go to Type, Selected Frames. We're going to do a PNG, just going to save it to desktop here, and we'll go Mountain Scene. And then we'll pull up Photoshop. Is there another way to get this to, there we go, got it. Okay, so we're gonna open that up in Photoshop. Here we go, and y'all probably get the picture. So I'm gonna go to Gradient Map, and white to white is not the move. Actually, before we do that, trash this, by default it's gonna be in grayscale, so just as a heads up before you start messing around with stuff. So we'll switch that back to RGB. Gradient Map, here we go. It's all happening, folks. Look at this. It's all happening. Okay. So if the screen weren't too small, there we go. Okay, so now, I'm a gradient freak. I don't know if y'all knew this, but I'm a freak for gradients. So I have like a bazillion possibilities here, and then I tend to tweak from there. But if you're home, you can just change these right here. So, you know, maybe we want like, what do we want? So this is kind of the darkest. Maybe this is like our fog color. Go like a light purple. Oh, I never use purple. This is great. You know, and then maybe we want some like groovy pink mountains. I mean, why not? Oh, yeah. Oh, come on. I'm telling you, it's happening. All right. Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. And then maybe like, I mean, what is life without indigo, you know? All right. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay. Oh, come on. All right. So you guys can do more realistic colors. Oh, come on, though. Come on. Ah, yes. Okay. But mine are better. Okay, so this is great, right? Like maybe we could get a little sun in there. We could work on our composition. Like, you know, a lot of options from here. And I'll just show you real quick. Like if I throw some levels in there, I'm going to put them below the gradient map here. But, you know, you can, instead of, you know, really refining the gradient map or the depth pass, this is where you can get a little more of that magenta in your life. Okay, all right, so that is how. we take something, take a model or something as simple as just like a landscape that was a default object in cinema and make something really interesting and beautiful out of it. All right, so I think, that's my last demo for the day. Why am I clicking cinema? Okay, so just wrapping up here. So, I am enjoying 3D so much that I really want to share it with other folks who aren't really using it for photorealistic stuff, or VFX, for broadcast, but are maybe more interested in using it for the context of print or graphic design, or other scenarios where it's presentation media. So I started this site, 3D for Designers, and there's currently a subscribe box on there right now. And so if you're interested in learning more about this, want to see tutorials like what I did here today, and want to get resources for how to create this type of design with 3D, please sign up. It's 3d4designers.com. And I think that's about it from me. Of course, follow me in the usual places. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Allison. Before she steps off, we're going to do a little Q&A. So 3D is pretty huge, massive, mind-blowing sometimes when you look at it. Who's got questions for Allison on anything she was talking about or cinema? Anybody ever tried 3D? Boom, back there. All right.
Takes a minute to get the gears turning.
Oh. Hey there, awesome job, by the way. I'm going to be up there in like a minute, so just warming up. What was the name of the tutorial, or can you link up the tutorial?
Grayscale Gorilla. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, you know what, I'll just pull it up. So for anybody who is interested in a great sort of introductory tutorial, grayscalegorilla.com is where you want to go. These folks right here. And so they have an intro to Cinema 4D, or maybe it's just called Intro to 3D, but it takes you through that process of building the bomb. Yeah.
Hey, I'm curious, how did you find the hunger to explore 3D after being a little burnt out on product design?
It's a good question. I mean, so I felt like the fact that I hadn't been producing a lot was a reflection of my creative health. I think that when you are feeling creatively starved, you're not making stuff, right? And like if you've ever had to work a job that you didn't like, which is like probably everyone, right? You're just not, you don't have that that excitement in you that makes you like produce. So I think that when I had the chance to and started to like kind of get that freedom back, it was the natural thing to do. Once I started getting into 3D and even just exploring other stuff, I did a lot during that time. I signed up for like JavaScript classes and like did a lot of digital painting and like all kinds of stuff, kind of trying to find, a thing.
Hey there. Have you actually tried playing around with Unity?
Yeah, I have.
And 3D and all that?
Yeah, for
awesomeness?
sure. So if you, so a lot of people that sign up for 3D for Designers like really want to learn VR. I'm like paying very close attention to what people say that they want to learn. And Gabriel is going to be talking more about VR during this conference. But I got to say, like the act of one, creating a model in Cinema 4D, like once you get that part covered, then dropping it into Unity, not difficult, matter of importing, and then creating a first-person object in there, it's like absurdly easy. Like when you haven't done it, you're like, oh, that must be very difficult to like make a guy run around in a game. Not so much. So if you start on the modeling, you figure out how to drop someone in your world, VR is just one step away from that. Good to know. Any other questions? Drew's watching everyone like a hawk back there.
Yes, I am. Boom, right there.
So how long did it take you to learn the tool and feel comfortable with it? And for me, I have motion sickness, so I can't play like video games, Mario Kart. That always stops me. Sorry. Like that's the one thing that makes me wonder if I can even get into 3D because I get dizzy.
Sure. I mean, so for 3D specifically, I mean, I do a lot of 3D illustration. Like the Dropbox stuff is one example, but oftentimes there's like a cost to adding animation when it's not like a simple looping thing. So in a way, it's like I kind of think of it as like the way I would, open a sketch pad and like just start jamming, right? I mean, I think that there's that freedom of exploration and sort of like just putting abstract stuff on a piece of paper and finding forms. So, I think you have to do what you're comfortable with. But for me, it took about, what am I saying? I'm not comfortable with it. I mean, I know maybe 0.5% of Cinema 4D. And actually, when I was asked to speak at NAB last year, or early this year, whatever it was, I mentioned to one of my friends, Tim Reynolds, who is like an outstanding artist. He does beautiful low poly 3D work, beautiful stuff. And I mentioned it to him, and he's like, how much cinema do you know? And I'm like, significantly less than you. I mean, but it's not about how much you know, right? It's like 3D is vast. It is a duplication of real life. So think about that. It is vast. But, it's a matter of taking really like what you can do and what you're comfortable with. So I'm not like good at making things look really shiny, reflective, and photorealistic, right? That's not something that I do. So I work within those constraints. So if you have constraints, you have to find a way to work within them as well. Cool. Yeah, thanks.
So thanks for doing the demo. I really appreciated seeing how accessible that is. One thing I didn't realize, I've done 3D work a little bit. I did the grayscale gorilla stuff.
Cool, yeah.
Your work looks way better than what I ended up with. And I think that's a part of your artistic flair, but also using other tools. Is that a normal thing that a lot of 3D artists do, is bring it into Photoshop or Premiere or something for extra flair and color?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so I'd say probably with most people who are like doing 3D full-time, After Effects is kind of like the post-processing go-to. Photoshop is actually really rare. I don't know anybody else who does it. I do it largely because I find the gradient maps to be pretty central to my workflow when it comes to building up color. But I mean, so the Photoshop thing is like a little unusual, but for me it's been I don't know that I would be able to have the same output if I didn't have that post-processing in there.
I'm looking forward to the class. So if you cover a few of these things, the extra post-processing, that would be awesome.
I'm writing it down.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions out here? All right. Well, thank you, Allison.
Yeah, thank you so much.